Well, good evening. I wanted to share a little bit of my thoughts and experience when it comes to the topic of spiritual loneliness, or maybe loneliness in general, but I think probably this is a bit more like spiritual and emotional loneliness. I've been experiencing some of this over the last 4 years, and I feel like it's kind of coming to a close now, this topic for me. And I wanted to share what I've experienced, what I think I've learned. And perhaps some of that will be applicable to you. So, in a nutshell, in the last 4 to 5 years, my family and I have taken steps to get out of debt, build up a lot of money, prepare to go to be missionaries somewhere, anywhere. And we're now in the process of giving away all of our possessions, selling our house, and going on the road full time, going from national park to national park, raising our children and homeschooling them, but also seeking opportunities to tell people about Jesus. And that seems to be a somewhat rare thing to do. And there have been many times where I feel alone. This isn't something that my family did, that my father did. There aren't a lot of people, there aren't anyone, there's really no one I can pick up the phone and say, hey, when you were 35 and you quit your job, and when you were 37 and you sold your house, like, how did you handle this or that? There's kind of no one to call and ask those types of questions to. And so I have been feeling alone. And as I have shared some of my experiences and emotions on spiritual loneliness with people that I love and trust, I've found something interesting, which is that oftentimes they feel spiritually alone. A couple of examples. I have someone close to me who is running a 5-person business and is a single mom and feels very alone, doesn't know a lot of people in her situation who aren't disparaging her ex-husband, aren't sleeping around, dating around. And anyway, this person feels quite alone. And I had a friendship with a pastor many years ago. He said to me that friendship was a pleasure that he didn't get to experience on earth because of being a pastor and having a certain level of separation with people in his congregation. I have a friend who's a missionary in the Middle East region, and he's also expressed a sense of loneliness. And so it's kind of an interesting paradox if you talk to a bunch of people who are very serious about their relationship with the Lord and have surrendered their life to Him, and yet they feel lonely. It feels a little bit kind of unfair. It also feels a little bit strange that so many people can feel lonely. It's almost like, well, then just get together and then you won't feel lonely anymore. And for me personally, I have now seen that my spiritual loneliness has primarily come from a place of pride. I think it's been wrong. I think it's been, in many cases, sinful. And what I've determined for myself is that I actually sort of wanted this loneliness, so to speak, because it allowed me to put myself sort of on a pedestal to say, well, there's nobody else like me who's as serious or dedicated or surrendered to the Lord. And so here I am all alone. And it was like a pity party. Now, it was well disguised. It wasn't so obvious as a pity party. And I was also very good at sharing just enough with people to get them to, pat me on the back and say, oh, you poor thing, I'll pray for you. But I think in hindsight, it was a pity party. And there's a few things that I've come to see that help confirm that for me. The first thing, start with the scripture in 1 Kings 19. Yeah, 1 Kings 19. Elijah is basically hiding in a cave, and the Lord says to him, what are you doing here? And Elijah says, basically, I am the only one left, and they seek to take my life away. And so basically, Elijah's kind of having a pity party, saying, like, I'm the only one who hasn't bowed down to Baal. And later on in 19, God tells him that there are 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not yet bowed to Baal. And I don't know how to read this like in the original Hebrew, if this is like a rebuke or a confrontation. All I do know in plain English is Elijah felt like he was the only one left. And God basically said, you're not. There's actually a lot left. And I once used that verse to comfort me a little bit, like, oh, James, you're not alone. And now that verse has kind of become like a bit of a rebuke to me. Second thing is, and this is not like new information, but from the very beginning, I've always known that what I was doing wasn't really that radical. There are many thousands and thousands of people who have made more radical, more sacrificial decisions to lay it all down and turn it all in and follow the Lord long before they were 35 and had a family and a big bank account. So I always knew that I wasn't, just radical of the radical. The other thing I began to realize about loneliness is that in some ways it's very logical and practical. And the imagery that I used for that was that of a military. So let's say that someone is a military commander and he has, let's say 20 generals and 40 colonels and 60 majors and 80, lieutenants. Well, he's going to separate out his generals into 20 different areas, and he's going to assign each of them 2 colonels and 4 majors and 6 lieutenants. He's not going to let 9 generals huddle together all the time and hang out and be together. The whole idea that someone has risen to the level of colonel or general means that he's of particular value and is going to be put in charge of things where he will be kind of the leader and alone. Even if you think of, let's say you find yourself and you consider yourself to be a very talented and good and knowledgeable colonel, a good military commander might pair you up with someone who's not that good of a colonel, who's not as strong as you, so that you can mentor him. Because very rarely would it make sense to have 2 incredibly talented, knowledgeable, wise colonels right next to each other, sort of in the foxhole. It would make sense to disperse them. It wouldn't make sense to put all your strongest people on your left flank and all your weakest people on the right flank. And so just sort of thinking of it strategically, let's say, oh, James, that sounds like a prideful analogy. You're not a colonel or a lieutenant or anybody. Okay, that's fine. Let's just say I'm a machine gunner, or let's say I'm a sniper, or let's say, I'm the radio guy or the medic. Any one of these jobs that you might call specialized, you still wouldn't have them all hunkered together. You'd have one medic over here and one medic over here, or you'd have one sniper up here and one down here. You wouldn't clump them all together. And so if you look around and you sort of say something like, well, I'm the only one in my community who's, a great administrator or a good teacher or an encourager or merciful or prophet, and you find yourself feeling a little bit alone. Well, it's actually kind of totally logical that people of the same talent should be distributed to different places. Okay, the next thing that happened, there's kind of 3 examples of, in my opinion, very bizarre and unlikely encounters that I've had with people. And I'm going to leave their names out of it for their privacy. But if they're listening, then they'd be able to put these things together. So several years ago, because of this, about 2 years ago, because of this YouTube channel, someone contacted me via my email and basically shared that they'd been watching my channel and really liked what I was doing and didn't live that far from me and had an Airbnb, and basically said, why don't you come stay at our Airbnb for a couple days? And these people were Christians, and they were about 15 or are about 15 years older than us. So their kids are, older than ours. And we just like connected fast at a very deep level. I mean, we sat around the campfire that night. Basically, the day before we'd been strangers, that night we're sitting around a campfire. They've since come and visited us here in Chattanooga, and they even have supported us not just with words and emotions and things like that, but financially. When my son and I were going to Puerto Rico, they sent my son some money to help him go to Puerto Rico and support him financially. They supported me to go to India. And these were like complete strangers. And so far as I see it, God basically just like dropped these people into our lives to encourage us. I mean, it's a real friendship. It's not just a one-way encouragement, I hope, but really just an incredible relationship. And I recently said to these people, and it's true, I've been in Chattanooga for 10 years, and there are people who I've known for almost 10 years. I don't have that same relationship with them that I do with these people that I met through YouTube. And so when 2 soldiers who have never met have carried similar burdens and been through similar firefights and things like that, and they connect, they have a lot in common, even though they don't even know each other's last names. And so this idea of loneliness from the practical, physical sense can really be squashed quite quickly by the Lord to encourage us. So then I want to read 2 emails to you that I've received recently. And I'm not going to give the names. And so, in that sense, I feel like I'm not saying anything against these people's privacy. So, on February 6th, just like 2 weeks ago, right around the time we listed our house, I got a message on Facebook Messenger. Hello, James. I found your YouTube channel while working on an older Honda Odyssey CV joint replacement. I was struck by our parallel lives. My family and I are also Christians. I work for a ministry down south. I have an interest in personally maintaining all of our resources. My name is also James. Laugh out loud. We also sold our home and traveled in an RV for a year to visit many national parks and connect with our family without being distracted. We began homeschooling our 2 daughters and had a goal to visit many churches across the nation and to see how God's people are connected, and it was all amazing. I just wanted to drop you a line to encourage you on your path for seeking God, on your plans to grow closely as a family, and on your discovery of a meaningful life. I watched the videos of your home sale and wish you much success. And then he just mentioned about how to get in contact. So I've been chatting with this guy now for like 2 weeks, and he's offered some like really wonderful insights about traveling with your family and preserving the memories and selling your house. And turns out we have even more things in common than we even knew. And it's hard to describe to someone just how deeply impactful it is because of the level of, some people may call that a coincidence. Some people might say, well, if you live long enough, you're bound to meet a couple strangers who have something in common with you. And that's all fair and fine. But at some point, that type of arguing becomes a little bit insufficient to describe what's happening. And I'll just give you a simple example. If you go for a walk in the woods, you may find an area that's a little bit padded down where an animal was laying, and that's not necessarily an indication of a trail. But if you find an area that's been padded down, and then another area, and then another area, and it continues on for miles and miles and miles, at some point you stop calling that a padded down area and you start calling that a trail where people have been walking. And someone could come along and they could say, like, oh, well, you don't necessarily know that's a trail. That could just be where an animal was laying and they just happen to lay next to another animal. It's like, well, yeah, but at some point, the level of coincidence and the infrequency of likelihood or the probability becomes so small that you have really no choice but to just call it a trail. And in those circumstances, sometimes people use the word destiny or luck, or people say the stars aligned, and that's fine. What I say is that's a divine encounter. That is an encounter between 2 human beings that in some way, shape, or form was orchestrated by the creator of this world to bring something positive, whether that's encouragement for me, whether that's that person getting the joy to share their story, whether it's something for each of us. I don't really know, but I know that God can work in a way that 2 people are benefited. So then 2 days ago, someone wrote me an email at therojek5@gmail.com, which is kind of the email for this YouTube channel, and just said, James, I found your YouTube channel as a recommendation for attic upgrades of all things. As a Christian, husband and father, and now an engineer who grew up homeschooled in Tennessee, it looks like YouTube was eerily spot on. Interestingly, from 6 to 8 years of age, I took a trip in an RV around the USA for 18 months with my family. I just wanted to reach out to you and say that my family will pray for yours on this upcoming adventure. My experience as a child was a tremendous benefit as I grew into adulthood. It was nearly 30 years ago now, but I hope your family benefits as much as mine did, and that the Lord uses yours in great ways for his glory. If you have another blog or something of this nature other than YouTube, I will endeavor to find it. God bless you and your family. So, you know, to be like within 10 days of selling our house, which has been a little emotional because selling a house is emotional even when it goes well, within like 10 days, completely out of the blue through 2 different sources, although both YouTube, 2 different people who had experienced what I'm about to experience, first as a father and then the other one as a son 30 years ago, drop me a line to say, I want to encourage you, I want to pray for you, and I just think it's incredible. I think it's really incredible. And I was telling my wife a couple of days ago, I'm like, I really have no grounds anymore to claim loneliness, to claim spiritual loneliness. I have wonderful family. I have many wonderful friends. I have great former colleagues at Volkswagen. I have good neighbors. I have tons of people. Like, what on earth, where on earth does the justification come for the claim that I'm spiritually lonely? And I have come to realize and believe that although some of it may have been true, a bulk of what I thought was spiritual loneliness was really my pride saying, there's no one quite like James Rojak. And so, woe is me. I've also realized, and God has been gracious to me in this, I've also realized that, like, occasionally over the last couple of years, someone has said to me, like, oh, I know someone who did something kind of like that. Or they've indicated that there's kind of someone out there like me. I haven't liked it. I haven't been encouraged by it at all. Actually, it kind of, spooled up in me like a level of competitiveness. Like, well, I bet they didn't do it as young as I was, or I bet they didn't do it as good as I was. And so I realized there was like a hint, like, you don't actually want people who are doing the type of thing you're doing, because then you're less unique, you're less interesting, and you're more just common. And so I just wanted to, I often think, what can I contribute to the world? What can I give YouTube that doesn't already exist on YouTube? And I really, truly don't think there's that much. Anything that I try and share on here has been shared before. I'm not coming up with many unique ideas. But one thing I found that I'm kind of willing to do a bit more than the average person, I think, is to be transparent and share. I've shared things with mere strangers about sins that I have, struggles that I have, fears that I have, and I've found that for whatever reason, I'm a little bit more open and willing to share things than a lot of people. And so, what I can offer the world and YouTube to some extent is transparency and openness and vulnerability at a level that maybe not everybody's ready for. And so that's one of the things that I want to be included in this channel is almost just like confession. James 5:16 says, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another and you'll be healed. And in some ways, this is almost like a confession for me of like, I thought that I had this problem that others and God needed to solve. And it really turns out that it's like my problem. It's pride, which shouldn't really surprise me or us. Anyhow, I hope that was helpful. I wanted to share that. And God bless.